The future trend price projection slope charts is one of the most unique and interesting features of the product. And even though there are warnings everywhere about this, I'll just say again that obviously the prices projected are not predictions. They are simply projections based upon old data, what supposedly could happen in the future based upon that prior price path. So here's how to use it. You go to the menu and you choose Future Trend. And it brings up a dialog box which explains again that this is not a prediction. But here you've got three different choices on the drop down. The normal one is show real price data. That's what everybody normally gets, just the history. This one is show future trend, and this is where it projects out into the future. So let's just choose that for now. And so here we have the spider, SPY. Now, as I'm recording this, we've been in a 9-year bull market, so it's no surprise at all that the price projected continues to just ascend unabated. I'll point out it's obviously not just a straight line. It takes into account seasonality. So we can see here September, October, which traditionally this 5 or 6 weeks of the year tend to be bearish, so it reflects that seasonality. But let's look at a few other charts just to get some different ideas how this works. Here's General Motors, for example. Once again, clearly just not a straight line up. It takes into account prior price action, seasonality, and illustrates its projection for General Motors. How about one other one? Just to here, we'll do something which isn't really an equity. It's oil, USO. This one's quite interesting because in this case, it stays in this very clean cycle. And so if one basically bought into the credibility of this projection, one would assume that it would be a pretty good time to go bearish on oil, and it would bottom somewhere in January 2019 and move up from there. So depending on when you're watching this, you may see how this sort of panned out in terms of a price projection. Well, there's another choice here, which is a way to not see the future, but to see the past. And that may seem silly since the past has already happened, but what it does for you is the prior future trend. It sounds like an oxymoron, but the prior future trend lets you kind of take a time machine back and pretend, we'll choose 5 years, which is the extreme. We'll pretend that it's 5 years ago and see what this feature would have predicted 5 years ago. And so here we can look, and this is 5 years ago, and it actually did a pretty superb job predicting what would have happened, and then things started to deviate here. So as you can see, oil fell quite strongly, but the path was pretty decent in terms of the shape and the seasonality, but the actual price got much, much weaker than it had. Let's take another example. We were looking at the spider earlier. We'll bring that up. All right. So here's 5 years ago. And once again, it did a pretty respectable job showing where it thought things would go. Not quite as volatile. In fact, if we go back to here, you can see that it was pretty much on the money for a couple of years. So the purpose of this is to do your own kind of credibility check on the instrument. We'll take one last example. We'll take a very crazy one, Amazon. And so here, this is 5 years ago from this recording, and you can see here the actual price of Amazon greatly outperformed the projected price. So Amazon actually went to about $2,000 a share, whereas the projection was merely $600. So if nothing else, shows you what a surprising move Amazon has had. But by experimenting with this, you might land upon instances where the past projections seem to line up pretty nicely with what actually took place, and that might give you more confidence that the future price projection has more worth